In part two of this wide-ranging conversation with iconic New Zealand musician Phil Judd, we continue with the story of the Swingers, the creation of his first solo album, Private Lives, with legendary LA producer Al Cooper, and his work as a soundtrack composer for film and television. The songs, in order of appearance, are One Good Reason by the Swingers, Dreaming Away from the album Private Lives, and No One's Best Man from the album Mr. Fudd and his Novelty Act. Let's just backtrack a fraction. There's two things that I want to ask you about. And the first is you were in Chris Knox's Enemy for a very brief stint.
Well, no, again, this is myth. I was never in the Enemy. We became kind of mates for a few weeks and hung out and stuff because we both bands had used the same little kind of building to rehearse in. So, it was a small scene and everybody got to know each other, and Chris and I got on well, and they had lost their bass player or something from vague memory, and I said, I'll come along and I'll just play with you for a night at rehearsal. And I played bass, just wanting to hang out and have some fun. And that was the sum of it. That's all that happened. There was no me ever joining or anything. It was just, it's because I think there's a couple of photos of us together, that gives the appearance that I'm part of the band, but I was never part of the band.
1979, I was down at Marbeck's in Queen's Arcade at the bottom end of Queen Street, and there was an album in the window called AK-79. And I thought, that's kind of fascinating, and I bought it. I'd been reading about you in Rip It Up, and I was a fan. I was following you and interested in everything you were doing. I bought the album, as I saw the Swingers were on it, and I went home and bugger the rest of the album. Those Swingers songs, I still play them today. the guitaring, the melody, the words, the structure of the songs. They were just absolutely brilliant. Some of my favourite music ever.
Really? Oh, well, you are a crazy man. What can I say? I'm flattered, but at the same time, I feel for you.
How do you feel about those
certain sounds on a track on it? What else is on it? Can you remember?
Baby.
Baby, yeah. Baby was initially a Buster song that I kind of rehashed and rewrote the lyrics and kind of just basically did a Judd on it, the same as I did with Suburban Reptiles, Saturday Night Stay at Home, when I got to produce that before all this happened. Yeah, well, some of them, again, like even on Play It Strange, there's the sort of musical places I go can be very varied, and they can be within the one song. I was starting to do stuff like Certain Sound, which is quite jangly kind of pop, but at the same time we had real thrash stuff going on, which never really kind of was recorded or saw the light of day, except for a couple of tracks that were recorded at the NZBC with Brian Staff. A song called Never Never and I Just Work Here, I think. It was the two sides to the Swingers, and by that stage, by AK-79 stage, the more poppy side of power pop, as I would call it, kind of phase of the Swingers was starting to happen. That's what tweaked Gudinski's ears. He heard the sort of poppiness and the melodies and whatever. It wasn't just your sort of punk grunt. So yeah.
Now, Counting the Beat, of course, was a phenomenon in Australasia. It just stormed the charts. I remember reading an interview with you many, many years ago. It was a bit of a millstone around your neck, actually. You were saying you'd turn up to do concerts and all people wanted to hear was Counting the Beat.
Well, yeah, particularly because we were Aussie-bound by then. We lived in Melbourne and, it was a hit within a week, and it was so different from a lot of the other songs and material we did. It always had the ability, from when we first started, back then we were so busy that we often didn't get to rehearsal rooms, so we would go to whatever gig we were playing and play there for the afternoon, work on new materials, just jam, whatever. The groove of Counting the Beat sort of happened one day, and the sound guy was down on doing the sound thing out the front, getting the sound together, and he started bopping around like dancing. We hadn't sort of seen a lot of that, and I immediately realized that it had a groove that people could dance to, and it had a happy vibe and all the rest of it, and it didn't twig to me until, of course, it was released, that how true that is, and it's still played in nightclubs. I've got somebody in Sydney contacted me just a week ago about hearing it in a nightclub, and amongst all the modern dance stuff, Counting the Beat comes on, and everybody, like they hadn't before that point, just flocked to the dance floor. So yeah, it's I'm kind of it's I don't know what the word is. It's kind of my bane, but it's I'm thankful now at 60 that apart from my disability pension, it's a little bit of royalties that come in is what keeps me afloat. I hate to say it, I know it's driving everybody crazy with the countdown ads and New Zealand at the moment, but the royalties are all split evenly between the three of us. It's not like I'm the one made all the money. It's not much money at all. It's just in Australasia, for God's sake. It's like not even a year's average wage for most people, but for me and Buster at the moment, it's what's keeping us alive in our early 60s.
Here, I lived through its first incarnation as a big hit song, and then it was used by Decca, a defunct chain of...
Sorry.
That's all right. A defunct chain of stores in New Zealand. Then it was used for New Zealand, TV3. They had it as their slogan in 2011. Right. And now it's back, as you said, for Countdown. But it's a song you just never get sick of hearing.
Yeah, well, that's not what I've had on Facebook.
Oh.
Oh, Jesus, Judd, if I hear that again, like it's all my fault. But it is what it is, I mean, the fact is that the Swingers broke up in debt, I spent the next 10 years paying off the debt that the Swingers were left with. It wasn't like we broke up and I was swimming in money and royalties and whatnot. Far from it. We had lost money. from touring with the most expensive production, road crew in Australia at the time. We weren't pulling huge crowds because our album was released like 9 months after a hit single, which was a fatal flaw of Gudinski's. He didn't foresee that Counting would be so popular, and that that's what you normally do. You have it's the album that makes you the buck from the effect of the hit single, and we didn't have an album out. So that was a fatal flaw, and we broke up in debt, and like I say, I spent the next, even though the royalties were equally split between the three of us, to this day, of course, it was silly old me that is the one that's had to pay back what was owed, because I'm the one that's still a songwriter, or was still in the music business as such, it didn't kind of balance out the one for all and all for one theory.
How do you feel about that album now?
It's very noisy. It's chock full of kind of angst and stuff that I was still bearing at the time. I find it hard to listen to be frank, and I kind of regret that a lot of the early Swingers stuff didn't make the vinyl. It was tunes I'd written in Australia upon arrival, kind of trying to be more, I don't know, commercial, I guess is the only word for it. It's kind of, I don't know whether I should go there on this topic just yet, but, the fact is I'm bipolar, and at that stage I still wasn't diagnosed. I was just somebody that would have moments and would have a week or two of being, the black dog, totally bedridden and whatever, and wouldn't go to rehearsals. And if we were touring at the time, I had to drink half a bottle of bloody brandy to get up and do it, and that didn't help. That was around the time, the Swingers and After Counting was the time that, let's say, my head problems really hit the fan in terms of confidence, and you'd think I would be on a confident high after Counting, but I wasn't. The stress and the import of having to follow up and do all that business stuff, interviews and whatnot, then, still being relatively young, what was I don't know, 27, 28. I wasn't for it like, say, our friends, the Finns are. They were gifted with that social ability. I was never a social person, I'm kind of just not that person to be at the forefront. And I always did it reluctantly because there was nobody else there to do it. And the pressure of being guitarist also, in a three-piece band, being guitarist and playing the sort of quite convoluted parts at times and sing and kind of try to be some sort of a front guy was just too much.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's something we have in common. I also take medication for bipolar, and I can empathise with the things you've just said. I've been a working musician for a great portion of my life, and things have routinely fallen apart for me in ways that I couldn't explain to anybody. And it wasn't until I got diagnosed and put on medication that I began to see clearly what was going on.
Right.
Yeah. So I've been there. I am.
And
there.
as you know, with bipolar, there are, of a scale of, if you did take a normal scale of 1 to 10, there are all those variables mixed in. It's not like a broken leg is a broken leg. Bipolar, there are variables. I have a lot of friends who are musos who are bipolar. We kind of stick together and try to support each other, which is a conundrum itself. But so as you know, some people, it's a day or two passing mood swing thing. Others it can be weeks, others months. And by that stage, it had started to affect me kind of longer term. It changes, particularly if you're not medicated. We were gigging. I was, like I said, I was drinking too much to cope. Not into any other nefarious substances at that stage. It wasn't my thing. Yeah, that's my word on that topic.
Well, let's move on to Private Lives now. This was your big solo album. I really liked Private Lives.
Okay.
But it was. Well, I understand from what I've read, it was a very torturous process for you.
Well, to me, there's two different versions. See, what happened is the last days of the Swingers, the last couple of months, you might recall There was a New Zealand chap, who later formed Coconut Rough, and he was a good friend for a while there. Andrew McLennan was called in to be frontman, and people have always said, why the hell did you do that? And it was because I was in such a bipolar funk that I just totally lost confidence, which some people just don't understand. That just didn't work as hard as Andrew tried, and I wrote a whole bunch of new material especially for that. It didn't seem to gel. Gudinski called me, and we'd started losing a lot of money, and Gudinski called me into the office one day and said, Phil, this is it, you're going to have to break up the Swingers, and what I'll do is I'll give you a budget of blah, 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 which is bugger all, to do a solo album. I believe in your songwriting. I think you still got it, whatever, and go off with this engineer, Michael Leffler. Go to New Zealand. We've got a cheap studio there that we can use, which we did. We had 31 days to record the whole album, just me and the engineer. And I used a couple of people like Bones on one track, and that's about it. I did the whole thing ourselves in 31 days, recorded and mixed. The funny thing is that what actually came was the solo album, because like most albums, you record more tracks than are used and be selective. A lot of the material, again, like it's happened to me over and over, the stuff that I chose not to put on or Gudinski didn't like, it was my favourite stuff. So there was enough there. It was done very cheap, put it that way. And Gudinski still thought there was something there. He didn't like it, but he thought there was something there. And he got Geffen interested in the States, strangely enough. And he didn't want to put an arm and a leg into it, but he helped get Al Cooper on board, who some people will know the name, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Dylan, all that stuff, an icon really. And although I didn't know much about him at the time, come over to LA and we'll re-record some tracks, which I got to be honest, I've never listened to Private Lives since it's finished, Andrew.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking back, I'm a little bit confused about it. It's a mixture, from memory, it's a mixture of the sort of LA-produced tracks and some of the New Zealand-produced tracks. Or maybe it's not, I don't know. Because to me there was always the two versions. And the LA-produced tracks, I went over, it was very much, because by then I had sort of thought of myself as being, I'd become reasonably proficient producer, arranger, like I'd become musically proficient, having produced the Suburban Reptiles and stuff. I thought I can do this job now. I kind of know what's required and whatever with my own material. And to suddenly be in LA and have this guy who's like a generation older than me saying, sit down, stay out of the room, I'm the boss, I'm going to do this to your song, and that's it, and I'll call you in when the vocals are needed. That was the attitude, He gave me a huge ounce bag of Sinsemilla and said, do your thing, I'll call you in a few days. And, I was listening to rehearsals of the tracks being done. That was the most splendid part, was the Nax drummer was used, My Sharona, all that stuff. The backing singers on Dreamin' Away. Dreamin' Away I'm happy with. That's about it. Because, again, you'll note that song's full of vaudeville influences and whatnot. He did a good job on that. The backing vocals, the highlight of that whole experience was the hanging out the day that Al sat at the piano and worked out the male backing vocal group, who were like the top session guys in LA at the time, mixture of black and white guys, and just doing their vocals. I had never heard anything like it. In fact, Al took me one Sunday to a gospel in the black area because he was kind of respected and known in some quarters, and we were allowed kind of to attend a church service, a gospel service in some church somewhere. I got no memory of where it was. And I was just blown away, hearing a church full of blacks. I'd never heard anything like it before. Yeah, so that was all wonderful. The result was kind of an American attempt to make sense of wacky Phil Judd tunes. I thought Dreaming Away would do better, but it never got any airplay, and it just died a very quick death. That was it. That was 1982, 83, and by the end of 83, I had just that was it for me. I had tried my best, and I was going back to painting full time, working freelance as an illustrator, and so up to that point.
Well, I'd just like to chip in at this point and say, because I'm the ultimate fanboy, I've always been a big fan of yours, and when that album came out, I saw the video and radio with pictures for Dreaming Away. I rushed out and bought the album. I just loved it. I thought it was beautiful.
Oh, well, thanks.
And I did get the vaudeville thing and straight away in Dreaming Away, even though at that stage I wasn't as educated musically as I am now. I remember watching old films as a kid and watching silent films in particular with my grandfather, and there was just something in there that struck a chord with me, things from my childhood memory, and I understood intrinsically what was going on.
Shuffle out in the summer sun, I'm gonna get myself some fun. Step out in my own sand shoes, won't be back for a day or two. Shut my eyes and dream away, dreaming away. Sea is green, sky is blue, ain't nothing I would rather do. Sun is high, I'm lying low.
Sure glad I'm not a dancing bowl.
It's not like, I mean, I used to collect 78s and stuff when I met Tim. I did have more of a penchant for collecting, 20s and 30s vaudeville music, but it's not like I was ever obsessive about it. My parents met. My father had come back from serving and, was trying to get his life together, and he joined the Hamilton Light Opera Society, and that's where he met my mother, who was an English import. They both sang in light opera, so, that's obviously, there was enough music there. It's not like the Finns grew up in a totally musical family. I had some profound influence from that, even though I never got to see them. I remember looking at pictures of them dressed up, for Pirates of Penzance, and my parents with makeup on and all that sort of stuff. had a profound influence. And talking to somebody recently about, in those days, live entertainment in small New Zealand cities, a lot of it was kind of cabaret type kind of shows that would play at the municipal theatres or the town hall, and everybody in town would go, and it would be the odd dregs, the carryover of vaudeville shows of the time, like a 2-hour show, but with a comedian, with dancers, with burlesque type, titties and stuff. There's a little 7, 8-year-old sitting there with my dad and my mum and dad going to these sort of shows. That's what I grew up with, was kind of that. That's where that influence comes from, to go back there to try and explain it a bit.
We see that through Mental Notes and Second Thoughts, the covers in particular. You see that. You see exactly what you've described there being filtered through. Yeah,
I suppose. It's inevitable. But, in these here modern times, it means nothing to anybody, that whole generation of music. I was talking to a young fella in a band in Sydney the other day about how, what I was doing 40 years ago, it's like being in the 70s and being a guy who did music in the 30s, trying to explain, the difference, the amount that music had shifted from, you take your average tune and style of arrangement and putting a song together in the 30s and shift to the 70s, and it's huge, There's no link at all. That's why I find it odd as a 60-year-old to be still making music and still find that there hasn't been that quantum shift that there was when I was, like when we were in the early 70s. We were part of a new generation with a whole new world of music that had opened up in the 60s, 50s, 60s. But I find it odd. I'm waffling, but I find it odd that music's kind of stood still. Production's changed a bit here and there, but there's still your sort of regular bands and regular song formats and whatever. Nothing's changed much. It's odd.
Well, I'll just stop you here for a second and just say you're not waffling. This is absolute gold. And you've just expressed something that I feel very, very deeply about, and you've just said it perfectly. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Now, just before we move on to the Chanel Fenster era and your work on soundtracks, I think it's appropriate just at this moment to say that one of the things I really admire about you as a creative artist is that in your early 60s, a lot of musicians, well, they're falling back on formulas, or they're moving to formats such as the blues. There's really nothing new going on in them. But you are still right on game. You're still very, very inventive. You're acerbic. Your lyrics are searching. The guitar playing is astonishing. Everything about what you're doing at the moment doesn't talk about a man in his early 60s. It talks about a man still at his creative peak. You've got a very special gift.
Well, thanks. It's not been easy, but, I don't know where to jump to, whether you're going to talk about the Schnells or whether to just jump in here and talk about now a bit. But, I was, the house I'm in, I've been in for 12 years, and there's a bungalow at the back, and I had been using, when I'd been working on TV and film music, what happened was in the mid-90s, digital recording became available. I'd never been interested in recording the tape or teaching myself or having a home set up. I'd had a home set up to record demos in Britain, like a 4-track, but I was never technically minded. I didn't give a shit, that's somebody else's job, blah, blah. As a producer kind of frame of mind, I just thought of producing as more of, the arrangement of the song, the parts, and getting the band to do a good job. But then I just took note when digital recording suddenly became available via Pro Tools and Macs and stuff in the mid-90s, 95 exactly. I was asked to do my first big TV series. I'd done films before, which you're given a budget and you take a certain amount of that budget and it all goes on studio time and musos, and you're left with bugger all at the end in terms of profit. It's a lot of hard work, 2 or 3 months' work for bugger all. It's the same old thing. But digital made me sort of twig, if I can teach myself this stuff and have my own little room and whatever, because I've always been, I grew up as a kid loving I was the kid that was in the art room at lunchtime and after school, and at home my little bedroom was set up like a little studio. I was comfortable in my own surrounds. I was comfortable with myself. So isolation for me is a blessing, not a curse. I took what money I had, which was a lot in those days, 20, 30,000, and I bought a Mac Pro Tools system and got a guy to set it up. And I sat there for a month and read the manuals, and through trial and error, I taught myself the whole caboodle. And it's the best thing I ever did. And strangely enough, at the same time, I got offered the first TV series to do, which was 22 episodes over 6 months, which was a lot of hard work. That's, writing and recording 30 minutes a week's music, plus doing the fix-ups from the week before and all the rest, and being briefed on the episode that's coming up 2 weeks and blah, blah. Absolute nightmare. Well, I did that for 4 or 5 years, from 98, or mid-90s, 96 through till 2002. It was pretty much, I was locked into doing TV crap, to be honest. I didn't love it, but it paid like I'd never seen money before, and allowed me to buy a house and have a studio with a wonderful setup. And part of doing those TV shows, like particularly the cop show stingers that I did, there would be scenes, a bar scene, whatever. Well, my job, apart from all the underscore, was to do the songs that you hear in the background, that sound like a song, just loud enough to sound like something's going on, a blues thing or a jazz thing, all different styles of cafes and bars, whatever. So I had all this stockpile of backing tracks that I'd done. I'd never sort of thought, I'll do another solo album, whatever. I thought that those days were over, because I was still signed to a publishing company, but not as a songwriter, whatever. So the chances of me getting a record deal from 95 on were impossible. So then that all sort of came to a big crunch and end in 2002, and I twiddled my thumbs for a year or so. My marriage had broken up due to working like a bastard for 5 years, 7 days a week, literally, with enough money stashed away to know that I could survive for a couple of years, and why not do a solo album? And that's what I started to do with Novelty Act. And because I had a studio there, I thought, God, how lucky are you? You can actually sit there, go up there when you're feeling good about it, and do your thing, do it. And that's how, I came to start recording again. Really, I was doing it for me, not sort of conquer the world musically or anything, just to see what was there. Yeah, so I'll pull up there.
You're no one's best friend. I guess I'll never